Closer. Weird. Wait, maybe I can change this view speaker to gallery. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Christian. If it's not too much to ask, also so that I have some idea who I'm talking to, would it be okay if everyone can just say their names and where they are? And or really in one sentence, what your goal is with Tibetan, just in one sentence to keep it short and sweet. So, I have to announce you, otherwise you don't know who has to speak. So I just go around my screen now. So I see Maria Martinez.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah.
My name is
Hi.
Marina. I'm from Argentina, and my goal is to help preserve Dharma and transmit it as best as I'm ever able to.
Thank you. Tiago.
Hi, my name is Thiago. I'm from Brazil, and my goal is also preserve and translate the Dharma for Portuguese.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and one question, maybe also from my information. I'm just curious if you plan to do this full time, if you have this ambition to just devote yourselves to translation, or if you have other ideas and other aspirations. Okay, maybe again Marina and then Thiago.
I'd love to, really.
Okay, right.
Yes, I have this goal also to do this full time.
Okay, great. And then Nerea.
Hello, I'm Spanish. I live in Brussels. And same objective, try to help as much as possible, translating into Spanish, French, whatever is needed.
Okay.
Same.
So
and full time, yeah.
Full time, and you have two languages you can as target
I have
languages.
two mother tongues, yeah.
Two mother, oh great, awesome. Okay, then Daniel.
Hello, I'm also from Brazil. My goal is to help any Dharma activities, being translation or any other. I don't know if my goal is to be a translator. If my teacher says so, okay, I can be a translator. But I'm full to help in anything my teachers need.
And your teacher he knows what you're doing, I suppose?
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, he knows you're training to be a translator right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All
Sure.
right. And you, where are you? I forgot.
I'm from Brazil.
Oh, you live in Brazil, and so you're going to translate it to Portuguese.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Hi, Angelica.
Hi, how are you? I'm from Colombia. I live in New York. My aspiration is to translate as much as I can for good in Spanish and in English.
Okay, great, thank you. Robert.
Hi there, yeah, I'm Robert. I'm originally from England, but I live in São Paulo in Brazil. I work as a translator, but not in the Dharma, just as like a commercial translator. So I think eventually I would like to work full-time, focused on Dharma activities and to be useful in some way to spreading the Dharma, I guess.
Okay. And you translate into English or into Portuguese?
Both.
So you translate both. Into both sides, both directions?
Both sides, yeah.
All right, okay, cool. Okay, Gyaltsen La.
Yes, so my name is Gyaltsen. I live here in Spain, and yes, my aspiration also is to be as much as helpful as I can in transmitting and preserving the Dharma, helping as translator and as interpreter in full time. I guess that also depends on my teacher, on our teachers, but yeah, everything points on that direction. So I'm happy to go there.
Yes. All right, Nuno.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Nuno from Chile, and I live in Chile. I already work full-time as a translator from English to Spanish, and my goal is to help the Spanish-speaking community, especially here in Latin America, to gain access to precious Dharma texts, teaching, and in so serving my Guru's intention.
Yeah, in Latin America, I think there's a lot of demand and not so much offer at this point, right? Brazil is, I think, there's a little bit more probably due to the activities.
Yeah, Brazil is huge. They have
Chaktututu.
huge activity, but in the rest of Latin America is very little, and especially in the Sakya tradition, it's very.
Yeah. All right.
There's a lot of groups now, but tiny groups everywhere. Not as big as Brazil or Europe. This is completely different reality from here.
Okay. Rafaela.
So my name is Rafaela. I'm from Brazil, and my goal is to translate and preserve the Buddhism. And I would love to be a full-time translator. I don't know if it's possible or not. I'm trying to find out.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, of course, I know that this is it's a difficult question because the reality of having to live lives, especially as lay people, right? We need to support ourselves, and that depends then on others, unless we are somehow super fortunate to have some inheritance that we don't have to worry about it. But otherwise, we need to live from something, and yeah, it's difficult. I'm very much aware of it. But so that's not what I'm asking, because we don't know that, right? But just in terms of our aspirations. Okay, then I don't know how to Facundo. Maybe is that how you pronounce your name?
Facundo is right. I'm from Argentina. Same as everyone here. I have the same aspiration. I'm not sure also if it's full time my aspiration, but I would love to serve the Dharma.
Okay, great, thank you. Gustavo.
Hello, I am from Brazil also. And yes, my goal is pretty much the same. Try to help the Dharma to be translated into Portuguese. And as much as possible, I would love to work full-time as a translator and spend my time practicing and translating as much as I can.
Okay, thank you. And Sibel or Sibele?
Yeah, Sibeli. I also live in Brazil. Actually, if it's pronounced as it should be in French, you were right. It was Sibeli. But since I live in Brazil, it's Sibeli.
You translate? Didn't you translate the other day for Tulku Rinpoche?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Christian. Thank you so much for offering us your knowledge and experience. So yeah, I live in Brazil. I already work as a full-time translator at Chadugompa, Brazil.
Oh,
and
okay.
I translate into Portuguese and English, and already from Tibetan.
Okay.
But I still have a long way to go. So I'm trying to improve my skills.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same for me, actually. I still have a long way to go. So I think there's few translators out there who I don't think if any translator would ever say that, okay, that's it, there's nothing for me to learn. I think all translators who take their art seriously are always eager to learn more. But in any case, I think, also knowing, having worked for a little time now with other translators, also it's a very much a reality that there's still a lot to learn for most translators who are active at this point. Okay, then Zopa Tarchin. Zopa Tarchin, yes, I suppose. Hi. Yeah, hi. Are you sorry? Are you a monastic? I see the colors. And okay. So.
Yes, I'm from a monastery in Girona, in Spain.
Okay, which monastery?
Samye de Chilin, Cayu Monastery.
Samye Dechenling, okay.
From Akon Rinpoche. Is the
I see, okay.
was the abbot.
Sure.
And I don't know, I suppose my goal is to be a useful tool for the Dharma. I'm not really a translator. I'm just a monk trying to do what it's needed here. And I think this is very needed now. So that's it.
But you want to translate?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Just to be, because you say you're not really a translator. That's okay, but you want to do that as a job,
Yes,
not as
I
a
cannot,
job, but as a as a calling or.
but I cannot call myself translator
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, thank you. And then Nadia.
I'm sorry, I'm having like my internet is not stable. So I'm Nadia, I'm from Brazil. I live here in the Northeast, in Bahia. I'm
nice.
Ziga Contra. Thank you. I'm Ziga Contra Rinpoche student, and I want to be a translator to be able to benefit sentient beings the way I can. So just try to do my best to fulfill this wish.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Alex, whom we cannot see. Is Alex here with us, or?
Let me write him a message to check whether he's there or not. Maybe he has internet problems, I don't know.
Oh. Okay, so I don't have like any. I put down a few things that I wanted to share with you. I don't have any like formal presentation or anything like that. Just I'm gonna share a few thoughts, and then we can have just a kind of informal discussion. Then you can say whatever you want to share or ask me anything. And first, I want to tell you also that I think what this program from Dharma Sagar, that you're actually super fortunate to be able to do this. In general, of course, there are not that many courses to study Tibetan in a structured and complete way. And even from among those, I think Dharma Sagar is really special because it's, I think, the first attempt to really bring together what has happened so far, but also the actual tradition of translation knowledge and translation studies, including the spoken dimension. I mean, that it's not completely new. There are other schools like in other places where, like Lotso Rinchen Zampo program and others, where they, of course, they learn spoken Tibetan as well. But I think the way it is done in Dharma Sagar is very special. So I think you're all very fortunate to be able to participate in this program and then see wherever it leads you and everyone. And also what I wanted to say, what I thought earlier, is I mean, it's not surprising that all of you, including me, also have pretty much the same aspiration, but it's also very beautiful in a way, because it just reminded me there's a verse in the Sanctum Manlam, the aspiration of Samantabhadra, where it says, I don't know it by heart, but pretty much it says, may I always gather with people who have the same aspirations as me and who have the same conduct, and we engage in the same activities. And may we always meet these friends, life after life, and then continue like this. So I think this is pretty much also the fruition of some kind of aspirations that that brought you guys here in this way together. So I think that's very beautiful and also meaningful to remember. So for me, just two words, I never had the goal at the beginning to work as a translator. Maybe like many of you, I was very interested in the Dharma. So I studied with a teacher. And then at some point I had the opportunity to learn the Tibetan alphabet. Many Dharma centers that is offered. So I learned that, and then I went to Nepal at some point, also to study at the International Buddhist Academy in Kathmandu. That's a Sakya Institute founded by Khinchen Ape Rinpoche. I don't know if you have heard his name, but he's a really very amazing being. He passed away a few years ago, but one of the great masters of our times. Not very known because he never traveled to the West, so that's why I think his name is not so well known, but one amazing teacher. And so in his institute also there was we studied the summer course for 3 months, and next to the Dharma classes there was also Tibetan taught by a monk. At that time he was still a monk. And so I took this class also, and I was just, I was so inspired all the way there when I was there. And then I enrolled after this, actually parallel to this, I enrolled at the University of Vienna, and I thought, oh, I should study more Tibetan. It's, I didn't really know what I wanted to do anyway, in terms of my life and work. But I was so inspired by Dharma that I thought I'm just going to do that and then see, what comes of it. And and I just continued studying in Nepal in the summers, and then at the university in Vienna during my master's there. And from then on, I just was super lucky because the Kempo of the IBA, the school in Nepal, he invited me to join his institute, and he said, you can be there and help us in any function that you think you can fulfill, and in particular in terms of coordinating a language program, because there was also a language training there for 2 years that was repeated twice, so there were 4 years training. And so I joined that language program. This is where I mainly studied my spoken Tibetan, which is horrible, by the way. I'm really not a good example of a complete translator because my spoken Tibetan is not good at all. But anyway, and then I made a big mistake at that time, and I really want to discourage you from doing that, is to work and study at the same time. So, and I think I don't know if it's now possible or hopefully in the future, that Dharma Sagar offers scholarships where people can just concentrate on studies. If you have that opportunity, don't miss it, okay? Don't do anything else at the same time. I did this mistake. For 2 years, I was in the same environment, which means I was at the school itself. I lived in this like semi monastery. So I could do the courses there, the language courses, but I also had to work at the same time. I was coordinating the program. I had to take care of the students, coordinate with external university that was facilitating visa and some additional courses, and then taking care of paying the teachers and stuff like that. So it was not a lot of work, but it was work, and it was distracting. And on top of the actual work, there's the stress, right? Because in language courses, and I can warn you already, no matter how great a language course is, there will always be complaints, and there will always be things that don't fulfill your expectations or another person's expectations. And this is where we have to be careful as students, actually, to deal with it in a skillful way, right? Because it's impossible. Any program, there's not a program that is perfect for everyone. It's impossible. So, and there's this saying I think it's in English also. I don't know which language. It's like if you have a basket of apples, and one rotten apple can spoil the whole basket very quickly. Right? And I experienced this. I'm not saying the person was a rotten person, but that person was very like, how do you say that, very frustrated with the course personally. And this frustration slowly spread to other people. We could see that really. So we have to be careful how we interact with others. Now it's not a big danger, I think, because we are all spread over the world here in this course. So if you're living, you know, in one facility with others, that's more of a danger because you're going to affect each other much more. But so just, you know, I think it's always good to take a very humble position, to accept and make the best of whatever works well in one's own program, in one's own progress within the program, and then make suggestions, but don't be hung up on anything that doesn't work, because that's difficult for the people who run the program, that's difficult for other students, that creates a lot of tension that is not necessary. So I think it's really good to, you know, always remember also in terms of Buddhist practice, one's own mind training, take the lowest position and be happy, be content with what is there, make suggestions, that's always good, that's needed actually for the program, but then don't be hung up, and whatever is possible, it's great, and whatever is not possible, maybe later. So I think that's for the harmony of the group, very important. And if there's no harmony in the group, then it will spoil the progress of the whole program. So I think, so I learned this the hard way, because I suffered a lot actually in our own course because of this. I had to deal with that person. Then the Kempo actually was saying, okay, I think we should let that person go. It's really affecting the whole program. And I was like, I was a bit too naive. And I was like, no, I know he has a good intention. He wants to learn Tibetan. He wants to be here. So let's, you know, we will manage. And it didn't work. And eventually he left. But before he left, he also, you know, had, I think, some influence on at least one other student who was then also getting more and more frustrated. So that was a hard learning curve for me. And I think it's good to be aware of that at the beginning of a course, and to try to avoid it as much as possible. And you know that the people who are behind this course, especially Drupchen, who is putting, I don't know, I think 30 hours a day in this, is just having very good intentions and trying the best they can. So I think it's really worth remembering that. And I'm not saying you don't do it. I'm just saying, you know, there's always this danger. So it's good to try to not go this direction. And anyway, I think it's an awesome program. So, okay. So some things I wanted to say about how long should I speak actually? What is this?
So we were planning for about 1 hour, but yeah, as long as everyone feels comfortable, it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so the other day I was listening to a talk quite randomly by a Thai teacher called Buddhadasa, Ajahn Buddhadasa. I don't know if you heard of him. He passed away already. He was a very strong teacher, you know, he wasn't afraid to have opinions that don't agree with, you know, mainstream opinions in the maybe generally, but also in, you know, the way the Dharma was taught and so on. And so in one talk that I just listened to the other day, he said, don't study Buddhism. You don't do it. And he went on and on about this a little bit, and I was like, okay, where is he going? Because I mean, what are we doing? When I was listening to him, right? He said, don't study Buddhism, study the Dharma, but don't study Buddhism. So what he meant was, you know, don't study all this, you know, the doxography and the philosophies and the Abhidharma. He's a big opponent of Abhidharma, actually. He says it's because it doesn't come directly from the Buddha, so it's kind of misleading, and or at least not what people should spend their time rather than this is study the suttas, the Pali suttas directly. That's also one reason why he was so controversial, because he said things like this, right? And I don't agree with all these things, but, right? But so one thing which I do agree with, from only the practitioner's perspective, it's probably right? There's no need to study Buddhism as like as an intellectual subject that we can have degrees in university from the practitioner's perspective, but really just study, the facts of Dharma and how to change one's mind and the reality, basically. Learn that directly without having to study all this philosophy. So that's great for practitioners, right? And especially if you have an actual teacher in front of you who can guide you in this way directly. But I think for translators, that's not enough, unfortunately. We have to study Buddhism as translators. I think it's really, really important that we study Buddhism as much as possible. Because as much as ideally translators would work together with, Khenpos who have Khenpos and Geshes, depending on the traditions, who have the most extensive knowledge in their tradition. First of all, if that's possible, that's ideal, and that's what should be done, right? So the translator can sit with a Khenpo and then receive, explanations on the text that he's translating, and then go back and forth, and then produce a really fine translation. But it's not always sure that we have this perfect ideal conditions to do that. And even if we do, we still have to really know what's going on in the texts that we are translating. It would be, I think, a mistake to translate a text with as a blank slate where you don't know, if you study Abhidharma text, you should have studied Abhidharma. If you translate practice-based texts, practice especially in the Tibetan tradition, because it's Vajrayana, that adds another dimension, because you have, these not only lineage specific, but practice specific, and then based on empowerments. So I think if we are true to the tradition, we should actually, as translators, really try our best to fulfill all these criteria, to be qualified in a particular practice, if we want to translate a particular cycle of practices, then to have received them and also to have practiced these particular cycles. And if you're all going to translate Tibetan, so 100% you will translate practice material, right? There's no way around it, because if you look at the many, many, many millions of volumes that have been produced by Tibetan masters, I don't know the percentage, but it's a huge percentage that's just practice Vajrayana based material. Right? So there's definitely ideally, I think it's important to receive these transmissions and teachings and practice these particular things that we're translating. But that's for Vajrayana. Now, for more generally, still really important to have the particular knowledge of the field that we are translating. But at the same time, there's also this, I think, a danger. And this I can also say from my own experience. So I'm super fortunate, because I work, one big job I have now is working with Khyentse Vision Project. Is this translation project to translate the works of Jamin Khyentse Wangpo. And then I also work still with International Buddhist Academy and translating, for example, works of teachings of Khenchen Ape Rinpoche. And so I pretty much spent my whole days with Dharma, right? But that can be also a big danger in one sense, because I feel that I'm always in contact with the Dharma in this way. And then there is this analogy that was given by another. I'm just quoting Thai teachers. I'm not quoting any Tibetan teachers. There's this Thai teacher called Ajahn Chah. You may have heard of him. And he gave a beautiful analogy. He says, if we just spend time with the Dharma, it's like having a ladle, a big spoon, a ladle, and leave it in the soup pot. So the spoon is completely immersed in the soup. The spoon is, but it's actually never used to feed oneself. So this is a little bit what I'm experiencing, because I spent all this time with Dharma, but it's from there to say that I'm actually, you know, practicing and changing my mind. That's a big gap. And I don't want to say regret regarding this. It's a bit maybe too much, but anyway, I think it's something also to be careful about, because it doesn't mean just because we are, you know, with the Dharma all the time that we are actually using the Dharma as it's supposed to be used, right? To change our minds. So and of course, and I'm sure that I'm just repeating what many people in the Dharma Sagar talks or from the administrators have said that, or maybe they haven't said it. I suppose. Who has talked before here? I saw that Damian Champa had a talk.
Damian talked. Then there is Kimbo Yugel.
Okay.
Kimbo Yugel is Shirabning ex-director.
Okay.
And Kimbo Nawantiltim from Djibouti.
Okay.
Yeah, who is working on now doing a PhD on lots of Rinchizambo at Sara.
Where is he?
He's in India now, but he's doing that in the context of Sara School in downtown.
Okay.
And yeah, and then we were expecting to have Kempo David also, who is translating Karmapa right now, but he's busy translating. But he's going to come and talk to us also.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So probably you've heard this, but it's certainly important and true. So that therefore it doesn't matter if it's repeated. That if for Dharma translation, the more it's difficult to say experience one has in Dharma. I don't know how to say these things, but the more one really, let's say like this, the more one really tries to practice oneself, the better it will be. The better it will affect one's translation. I think the more it will transmit whatever blessing one has received from one's teachers into the text, the more it will affect the way one formulates whatever one is formulating. Because if one is a practitioner, then, or if one has tried to practice, then words are magic in a way, no? The way words are affecting us, and if one has some experience and one tries to, again, I don't want to say experience. It sounds a bit big when I say if one has some experience, but I mean I hope you understand what I mean, right? If one's really trying oneself really to practice, and then one tries to transmit whatever is on this Tibetan page into another language, to transfer the meaning and also, you know, the effect of that meaning, that will be strongly influenced by one's own motivation and by one's own, again, I don't have a better word, but let's say experience of one's own practice. That's, yeah, I think we're all on the same page, I suppose. Does anyone have disagree with that? Yeah. No? Okay. That's good. So, okay, just I wanted to say two more things. Let me see. So one thing that I've also, as a little bit of a warning, what can happen if we don't have the knowledge in our own database, right? What I mean database is our own memory. So especially when you translate something that's not completely explicit, like poetry, right? In poetry, there's going to be a lot of analogies, a lot of contractions of meaning, because Tibetan. How long have you studied Tibetan now?
Just started for some, and some have
okay.
studied before. So it depends.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, but so probably you've heard already that because of the nature of Tibetan being a monosyllabic language, there's a lot of contracting happening, which is great for poetry because you can stretch or shorten words. For Tibetan poetry, which is a horror for translators, because I have to say that not only for translators, even for Tibetans, you once His Holiness Gongma Chichen Rinpoche, the 41st Secretary Dzin, said this to a friend of mine who was translating. He said, that's the problem with Tibetan, because it's like chewing gum. You can stretch it so much, And that's why sometimes you get some interpretations on a certain verse by one teacher, and the same verse will be interpreted very well also, but slightly differently by another teacher. And now as a translator, what do? I cannot make two translations at the same time, right? So I have to choose one. So then that's going to be strongly influenced by the knowledge I have received, either from my teacher or from commentaries. And I have to, be honest. And sometimes you have to write in footnotes also, okay, there's various possibilities, and I follow this reading rather than another reading, or I follow this teacher or rather than another teacher. So it's not only for the translator that's the nightmare, because as translators we are then responsible for whatever is read in the target language. But even within the Tibetan tradition, that can create a lot of different opinions on things. I had another thought. I will share this later. So what happened in one text I was recently reviewing is that there was a poem that was talking, in one part of the poem, that the author was talking about the 6 paramitas. And for each of the paramitas, there is, which one was that? I think it was generosity in this particular context, or giving. So there are different types of giving, right? Like the giving of material gifts, the giving of fearlessness or protection, the giving of dharma, and so on. And they were not explicitly mentioned in these. It's a four-line stanza talking about the different types of generosity, the results of generosity, and then aspiration. So everything very contracted. So the translator did not really see how the author actually talked about each of these 3 types of generosity in one line. And then he made up some translation, which he thought makes sense to him somehow. But he missed the actual point of what the author was talking about, which was he mentioned literally the 3 types of generosity. And that's because the translator didn't have maybe the studies of teachings like the Lamrim or Tenrim teachings, where you have very explicit, extensive teachings on, okay, what is the definition of generosity? What are the types of generosity? What are the obstacles to generosity, and so forth. So for translation, we need to have all this, ideally, this knowledge in the background. And even if we don't have it, then we can acquire it, right? We see, okay, I study about the 6 parameters. Okay, now I'm going to study for 1 week, 2 or 3 different Lamrim type teachings that explain generosity. So now I have some real complete understanding, as much as I could get it. And then of course you still check with other translators, and ideally with the Kempo, which was done here, luckily. So these mistakes could be spotted and corrected, but it's a nightmare if you have to correct all these things later on, right? So ideally, this should not happen. The translator should have the knowledge and should recognize, okay, these are the 3 or 4 types of generosity and so on. And yeah, and another thing is, and that's what gave me the idea to, Dubchen asked me what I should call this talk, so I just came up with this catchy title, Text and Context. And that's actually very important as well. And what do I mean by that is that texts, a text can be a full, extensive, multi-volume text, but it can also be a very short note that is just 1 line. So whatever the text is, it always stands within a context. And the context has to be really well understood as well. Very, very important. So to give you one example, okay, not going to give you the answer now. I'm going to ask you the word yeshe. Have you heard the word yeshe? Does it ring a bell for everyone? Okay. How do you each translate? Just give one word, okay? And don't change after you heard what other people say. Just say, now you hear yeshe, what are you going to translate it? Again, okay, I'm going to call you Marina.
Wisdom.
Okay. Nerea.
Sabiduría.
Okay. I'm not going to call you Drupchen. Daniel.
I think I'm affected by the words we use here in Portuguese, but I think it's conhecimento transcendental. It's like transcendental knowing. I don't know, maybe Sibeli can help this back to English.
I think I understand. Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I think I have this same influence. Maybe I'd say wisdom in English, and in the Portuguese translations we use here, it's usually transcendental knowledge.
Transcendental, okay. Facundo?
Okay. I think wisdom as well, but maybe also as clarity.
Okay, that's it. I don't need to argue for your choices. Just say whatever you choose. Sibeli?
Yeah, wisdom, actually. And actually in Portuguese for yeshe, we use sabedoria.
Yeah, that's wisdom, right? Sabedoria.
Yeah, and transcendental knowledge is more for sure.
Oh, don't argue. I just want to hear yeshe. Okay, Zepala.
Yes, wisdom.
Wisdom, okay. Nadia?
Uma sabedoria primordial.
Okay, we haven't heard that one yet, which I was very astounded that we hadn't heard that yet. This primordial wisdom. Okay, Alex?
Sabiduría primordial.
Okay,
Primordial
Gelsen?
wisdom.
Yeah.
Primordial wisdom.
Primordial wisdom. Okay. Now I'm gonna argue against you because I know you're gonna hear me later. Okay, Tiago.
Yeah, would be wisdom. Yeah.
Just wisdom. Okay. Gustavo.
Primordial wisdom too.
Okay. Rafaela.
Sabedoria, wisdom.
Sabedoria. Okay. Angelica.
Same as Nadia.
Nadia, sabiduría primordial. Okay. Okay. Nuno.
Yeah, my first call would also be wisdom, but I'm not so sure. So I would have to check before I make a real choice.
You're gonna you're gonna send me a WhatsApp message probably.
Yeah, I would probably text you and ask you, hey, Christian, how should I translate yeshe?
Okay, Paula. Okay, Paula, maybe not with us now. Okay, so we have, I think we have wisdom, primordial wisdom, transcendental wisdom, and was that it? What, did I miss one?
Transcendental knowledge.
Transcendental knowing, even, right?
Knowing or knowledge.
Knowing. Okay.
Both. We have
okay.
both.
Okay. Right. So now, okay. So I cannot say anyone was wrong or anyone was right. Okay. But what I have to say is I have to see, where do I read Yeshe? What is the text that I'm looking at right now where it says Yeshe, right? And so it can come in so many contexts. So first of all, the context, is it Sutrayana or is it Vajrayana? That already will affect the understanding or the definition of what is Yeshe. And then even within, let's say we are in Vajrayana, then what lineage am I reading? Am I reading a Sakya text? Am I reading a Nyingmapa text, a Kagyu text, and so forth? And then within these different traditions, then it's, look at definitions, look at, if possible. There is, of course, you have dictionaries like the Pögyä Tsiktsö Chemo, where there are a lot of very useful definitions, but they don't give lineage-specific definitions, as far as I know. And then you have the what is it called, the Mönlam Tsiktsö Chemo, right? There you have already, for many entries, when the people who worked on these had their own Sakya scholars or Gelug scholars to contribute, then they have entries like Sakya and Gelug and so on. That is really great. So consult these Tibetan dictionaries as much as possible. That's really, really helpful. Don't rely on glossaries. So I have to confess, I'm still using the very useful tool by Christian Steinert. I'm sure all of you have seen this tool, and it's really wonderful, but it's also super, super dangerous, because these, and I'm sure maybe you've heard of this already, I'm just maybe repeating, a lot of these are, first of all, not curated. So they're just translators who collected, equivalents over time and then just send it to the compiler of these dictionaries. And so sometimes you have offensive things written there. Like once I saw the name, I don't know who it was, the name of a female relative of the Buddha. I don't remember who it was. And then one of the translators, I don't also remember who it was, then said the auntie or my cousin or some darn thing of the Buddha. Okay, so that was a bit shocking. Of course, the translator never thought, I'm sure he forgot that he had written this in his own personal database, and then he sent everything there. So I'm sure it was never meant to be read by others. But so that's just to show that it's not curated, it's not selected carefully. And often, it's just that in one particular context, a certain meaning can have a certain equivalent in English, but which may be only 1% of the time useful, right? So, and if there is, first of all, no hierarchy in all these equivalents, how can a junior translator really understand? So which one is it in this context, right? So I see this, I'm teaching some kind of small Tibetan class to some friends, and we were reading the what is it, the Gyaltse Laglen by Togme Sampo, the 37 Bodhisattva practices. And I see this, and they all use these dictionaries, of course, and I warn them, but they still do it. And then sometimes they come up with really weird choices just because they see it and they think, okay, let's use this one. And that's very dangerous, okay, super dangerous. So better to really, if you can, use, as soon as possible, use Tibetan dictionaries and get used to that. Okay, so now to come back to Yeshe, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit incoherent, but so why I think it's so important, because for those of you, now I have to argue with Gyaltsen, you said primordial wisdom. So Sakya Pandita would not be happy with you. Right now. So there's
right now.
Well, you didn't know, so there's no problem. But I can tell you, because there's a text by Sakya Pandita called the Kijuk. There's also a text called Kijuk by Mipam Rinpoche. So that's not the same text, it's a different text. And the one by Sakya Pandita is about the three, if I remember correctly, the three activities of a scholar, which is, I don't know the order, but let's say composition, and then debating and teaching, right? So in the chapter on composition, he talks about translation a little bit. And he talks about mistakes that translators have made. And in this context, he talks about the word yeshe. And then he says that, okay, he analyzes the word, the Tibetan word yeshe. And Sakya Pandita was a great Sanskritist. He was I think the first Pandita, the first Pandita in Tibet. He was given the title by his own teacher, who was a Pandit from Kashmir. I think it was this teacher who gave him this title. Right, so he knew the meaning of the word jnana, which is the Sanskrit equivalent of yeshe. And jnana just means to know, knowledge. So then is the question, why is jnana translated as yeshe? Right, because you can have shepa, which would be the more closer equivalent. And in fact, in some cases, jnana, which just means to know in a very common sense, is translated as shepa or she. But in other contexts, as a noun, as this faculty, the wisdom faculty, then it's translated as yeshe. Why? So Sakya Pandita explains that this ye was added by the Tibetan translators to signify that it's a special type of knowing. But, and he is explicit about that, it does not mean that it's a knowing that is primordial. Even if, and I'm paraphrasing him now, even if based on the Tibetan etymology, it could have that meaning. Ye, like when it's explained, ye ne shepa, like knowing from the beginning. So from that etymological point of view, it could mean primordial wisdom, as you have translated. But he explicitly says, but that's not what it means. Okay, and then I think he explains that it's the knowledge that is exclusive to Arya beings, to Pakpa Kangsa. Okay, so now this is, if I'm translating Sakya Pandita, and he talks about yeshe, therefore I will not use primordial wisdom, right? So because I saw this text and he says it's not primordial wisdom, so I definitely shouldn't use primordial wisdom in the text that accords with his interpretation. But then if I translate another text by, I don't know, Mipam Rinpoche, and it actually does mean a knowledge that is there since the beginning because it relates to some Dzogchen meanings, then primordial wisdom may be the right and precise translation for that. Okay, so therefore the context is really, really important, that to respect that, to be aware of it, to remember it, and then to not use one blanket translation of a particular term and apply it throughout. Okay, and yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to say two more things and then we can open for interaction. So one thing that is very, very helpful, I'm just saying it because I thought of it, and but you're certainly going to hear it from many people, to use text critical approach. A text critical approach is very, very helpful and very useful, which means not relying exclusively on one edition of a particular text, but look around, see on the BDRC resource, which is absolutely incredible, that we have this. I mean, we have tools nowadays that are unimaginable, just, you know, to even the great lamas of the past. So we have, in this regard, we are really, really spoiled. And we should, as translators, it's really important that we make use of these tools to look at when we have 4 editions of the same text, we you know, most likely are going to find one that is generally the most reliable, as in case of the Kangyur, the Dege edition is generally regarded as the best because it was edited quite late by, I think, Situ Penchen, is that right, Trubchen? Who edited the Kangyur, who was a great scholar and also Sanskritist, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he did translate, but he didn't put it into the Tangyur, nor in Kangyur.
So he did translate, but not his. Okay.
Yeah, he did translate, but out of humility, he didn't include into the canon.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, so you can find you know, like the most reliable translation, and then use variant readings of, you know, other editions of the same text, and if possible older editions, and compare these readings. And then of course it depends, you know, if you would work in an academic way where you are also supposed to produce critical editions of a text, that's very, very, very time consuming. It's a huge task, and it's not what I'm doing, for example, right? So when I'm translating now for Kinsa Vision project, we are in a, also, there are not many editions of the works of Jamin Khyentse Wangpo. So there's not that much to look around, but there are a few. So the oldest edition that we have now is from 1919. And then we have the second edition, which was basically copied from that 1919 edition. That one was from Dzongsar, was one produced in Gangtok in Sikkim. And then there is a more recent edition, which was prepared in 2014. So the 2014 nowadays is like, because it's digital and it's easy to use, especially online, or yeah. So that's the basis. But often the correct readings, when I have a problem reading something, is actually in the 1919 edition, of which unfortunately we are missing 3 volumes, 3 entire volumes. But I mean, that's what it is. So it's so important to, even if I have a, you know, a beautiful digital edition, to always compare it with older editions, which quite often have, if there's a problem with a reading, and actually not only if there's a problem, it's I think good to compare it at least once, right, and to note differences, because even if a reading makes sense, another reading, and I mean I'm talking a little bit abstract here. I'm not sure if I make a lot of sense. It would be better to have, you know, texts and compare them, but I didn't prepare that now. Yeah, it's, you know, there can be 2 possible readings that make sense, that are different. So then what do we do? Okay, then we have to, of course, consult teachers, consult commentaries if we can. And in the case of Jamin Khyentse Wangpo, which is what I'm now working on, his sources are so diverse. I mean, not only does he write about all the subjects, not only of, you know, explicit Buddhist studies, but Buddhist sciences, but also the other sciences. But it's also about all the lineages, all right, all the different traditions. So it's super vast. So what is helpful is then to look for similar sources within these different traditions, because Jamin Khyentse Wangpo did not only write, you know, whatever he thought and came up with, but he took direct sources from different teachers, from different teachings, and he doesn't always say that. He doesn't say that, okay, this is a text that originally comes from this teacher or from that tradition. And right now in the studies that we have done so far, it's difficult to assess exactly the origin of these many of these texts? Did he write this just when he was studying a particular Gelugpa author, for example? I was translating a text on the Four Truths and Dependent Arising. So did he study this text by himself, or did one of his Gelugpa teachers tell him, write a summary of this text, like a homework, right? We don't know exactly. But what I did find through my research is that this text is very, very closely based and very often just copy and paste from this other source. So in order to understand this text by Jamin Khyentse Wangpo, for me it was super helpful to go back to this text by the Gelugpa Lama, because it was a bit longer. So sometimes when the text by Jamin Khyentse Wangpo was a bit terse and grammatically also, not so easy to understand, then when I looked at the longer texts that this was based on, and there was no doubt that it's based on that. If you see the text, it's 100% that text. Then it's very helpful, right? So look around. That's basically the advice is, look outside of what you're doing. Look at other commentaries, at texts with similar titles and so on, to see, and then read into them, and that will give you a lot of helpful context for particular texts. Yeah. I think I should stop because it's already 9, and maybe I still could say some other things, but I think it's better to stop now if you want to interact a little bit.
Yeah, I have a question or something like that.
Sure.
Well, about the first, before I make my question, this about Yeshe, why I was not sure is precisely because of what you said, because of the context and all of that. Yeah, it's true. But then also, there's another thing. When there's Tibetan sources, Tibetan text, even the Tibetan text, they have amendments. They change stuff with revisions and time and generations. I guess because they were originally made in wood blocks by hand, by craftsmen, and there's room for mistake there. And there are some amendments done with time. So it makes it all more important to ask Kempos and check the commentaries and all that. But what advice could you give to spot and how to deal with this things? Because when you find we're still not translating from Tibetan, but at some point we will, and we might find some of these issues in the Tibetan texts.
Do you mean you see a text and then you see the amendments that were made? Or what do you mean exactly when you say that?
No, I mean because, for example, with the text the Sage's Intent, for example, that there have been some corrections and stuff to the original text, and before these are made, is there a way to spot them and say, oh, there's something tricky here that should be checked?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to be careful when we say the word the original text, because in most cases, especially Sakya Pandita, he was some time ago, so we don't have an original text, right? A lot of the editions that we actually have access now are much, much, much later. And much later means sometimes emendations in the sense of corrections, but sometimes additional mistakes as well, right? A lot of this has happened, of course. So, yeah, ideally, as you said, consulting, because these are, if you're not talking about obvious mistakes, right? Because an obvious, like a delta or cheda, that's so common that they are changed around, and most of the time it's quite easy to spot the mistake. They say, okay, this should not be a delta, this should be a cheda. Do you know what that means already? Are you familiar with cheda, delta?
Nope.
Not yet. So these are grammatical particles that indicate a certain function of the word that is before them. And they look the same, except for the cheda has a sa at the end, and the delta does not have the sa. Right, so that's why they are very often, you see where there should be a cheda, sometimes it's just a delta, and sometimes when it should be a delta, by mistake it's written a cheda, and very often it's easy to spot that mistake. So we're not talking about obvious mistakes now, right? We're talking about, okay, there is a reading and I don't know what to do with this. So yeah, I think I collect these in the course of your translation. Don't stop at that point, probably. Continue with the translation. And then collect all of these points and then work with a very well-educated Kempo. That's the best, I think. Because in the case of the Tupa Gongsal that you just mentioned, we have this great fortune that Khenchen Apa Rinpoche taught it, and it was recorded and it was transcribed, and he did point out mistakes that were in the what we could, I don't want, like there's a, like the standard for the Sakyapa, they have this, the Sakya Kabum, which was, you know, printed in Dege.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the standard edition of the works of the great Sakya founders, including Sakya Pandita. But it has some mistakes inside. So Khenchen Apa Rinpoche, when he was teaching this, he said, okay, here it says this, but actually that's a mistake. And that's very fortunate, right? So I think that's the best. It's very tricky if we, you know, if we try as translators who don't have this knowledge, just and I mean, that's a mistake that's we have to be so wary of, to want to read something in a certain way or to expect a certain reading and translate it according to our expectation because we prefer it or because we want to read it in one way. But it's not really what the text says. But we say, okay, that's a mistake because I think that's what it should say, right? So that's a very easy, like I just said before, you know, it's often easy to point the mistake between these two grammatical particles, delta and cheda. But at the same time, we have to be careful because just because I think it's a mistake doesn't mean it is actually a mistake. So double, triple, quadruple check.
That's when I text you.
Don't text me at this point. Then when you are on this level, then text the Kempo. Oh, Dotuku Rinpoche, he will help you. You know him.
Yeah, I also bothering me a lot.
Yeah.
Miss headache.
I see Angelica.
Yeah. So yeah, it is Angelica or Angelica. Either one is fine.
Oh.
It's fine. Either one I'm completely identified with. You know, this thing that you mentioned about keeping the spoon in this nectar or whatever, I really worry about that because in our global society, I live in America. We're a very diverse population here, not only of thoughts, races, everything, if you will. And I come from Latin America. And I know that it's very, very easy as a Dharma translator to remain like this. And we can spend hours talking about texts and books and everything, but it never really reaches the hearts of the people that need it the most. And having been on both sides, I really worry about that. I worry about how in our effort to be a bridge, we end up being a museum piece, you know, something beautiful.
Do you mean
but
that
it's never
the translation
really
becomes a museum piece?
No, well, our work, because it's beautiful, but it never reaches people's whose hearts may be ready, but didn't even heard about this, you know? I always concern myself with that, like explaining the Dharma to somebody who wants to know it and doesn't even know anything about the Dharma is very hard, for example, for me. Only maybe teachers have that kind of ability, but when I'm asked about the Dharma, not even a translation, when I'm asked about the Dharma, to be able to say things in a way that are meaningful, you know, can be very challenging. So I think that when I consider myself in this effort, for example, and I've considered myself in this effort for a long time, I always have made this aspiration that it reaches, obviously, the Spanish-speaking population that never heard about it. That's why I got into it in the first place. That's why I left my career in the first place, you know? And so far, I know how much, like you said, we have to study Buddhism. We have to study it. We have to really, really, really study it. And we can say these terms in very specific ways and to work with an educated Kempo. But how is that listener going to get it? Is he going to get all that information? We talked about this. You know, Drupchen did this. He did this whole thing in the beginning with the verse on dependent origination, you know. We have one Kempo who talked about it, you know, the fact that beautiful Tibetan translations were made, but the people cannot understand them to this point. The lay people of Tibetan cannot really understand classical Tibetan, and how it needs to be actually written in a way that makes sense. So how do we get the level of the consciousness, the collective consciousness, where we're at, where all the, you know, samsaric things that's happening right now, and the Dharma? That is really the biggest challenge for translator and teacher, but us as translators, I feel like it's easy to get in a box and be very well researched and known and give our lives to that. But who's gonna, maybe not now, maybe in future, but how can people access it in a way that they can put them on the path, progress on the path, and even become translators better than us? That's sometimes my concern.
Yeah, that's a great concern to have. I think I don't have an answer for that.
Well, I mean, not to mention the fact that the people who are translators right now only represent one portion of the population of this entire planet, but we're so diverse, right? So all these things we have to take into account now in the 21st century. It cannot be just as it was before. In the 19th century or in the times of when Tibetans were translating Sanskrit texts, we have to take into account what's happening right now. I mean, we have a big responsibility, but I feel like it doesn't stop with us. We have to be able to see how we can be creative.
Yeah, okay, so that opens a huge discussion, which is probably actually important to have. This it is super important, this whole topic and this discussion. I can just share a few thoughts, because that's actually a point that I'm also, I think many people who are active in this field are concerned about. So there is on YouTube, I can probably find it and share with you. There is a talk by I think it's which university? It's a Western university, either American or Canadian, I think. They have a Tibetan language program there, and they had some Kempo, I think, teach some, like, you know, how to read a colophon, how to read this or that. Maybe Drupchen, have you seen this, or anyone?
I heard about it. I think Nera maybe has.
Do you know which university that is?
It's the Nettle. They started with a website like Nettle, maybe California. I can find out. I have it in my YouTube favorites.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. And there's one talk that was given by an American translator. I think it's a transgender translator who talked about the issue of gender, right? And I think the way he talked about it is very good, very balanced, because one issue, and again, as I said, it's such a big issue, so we won't be able to go into that here, but just to mention it, one issue which we don't want to do is change the texts, right? So if the text is sexist, like if it's actually talking about, for example, I'm not saying a text says that, I'm just saying, for example, okay? Please remember what I just said. If it says that all man. All men are stupid. Okay, let's just be super simple now. All men are stupid, okay, as a blanket judgment. And then nowadays, okay, yeah, if I would say that in a Buddhist text, and then that's the message that comes out in the translation, then everybody will not be happy about this, okay? So then as a translator, I say, okay, I want to reformulate it so that the reader is not offended. That's a mistake, okay? So if the text gives a certain judgment, then that judgment is in the text and I have to translate that. My job is not to reinterpret these texts according to modern sensibilities. That would be a mistake. That can be done, but then I have to be very explicit. I'm not translating this text anymore. I'm doing something else, which is okay, but I have to be honest about it. But at the same time, we have to be also, we don't need to introduce into our translations unnecessary pain for the reader. So for example, that's just an example that I'm remembering from this talk. If like there is somebody who has a certain disease, let's say leprosy, you could say he's a leper or he's somebody with leprosy. So that's and there are conventions in English writing that talk about these issues. When you say he is a leper, you basically reduce a person to a certain disease, right? That's the definition of that person is leper. And that's not right. That's not accepted as something that is the right speech in modern writing. So, and it wouldn't change the meaning by anything to say the person with leprosy, right? The meaning would be 100% the same, plus it would be in accordance with modern understanding of using this kind of terminology. So now I'm not changing the meaning, but I'm writing in a way that is acceptable or more acceptable to beings, right? So these are two things, and translators always have to think about this. So I don't want to change the meaning because then I'm writing my own text, right? But I also don't want I can formulate things in a way without changing the meaning that are still acceptable nowadays, that are meaningful. So that's one issue. And I recommend everyone to have a look at this video by this translator. I found it really good.
I posted in the chat is the Toronto University.
Okay,
and the YouTube channel is the Classical Tibetan Language Lab.
Okay, cool. So look for, I think that the talk was about translation and gender or something like this.
Yeah, I think that, you know, what I'm trying to get at, translation, gender, translation, and people racialized by their color or their class or anything like this. Yes, 100%. But I think what I'm trying to get is how do we trickle down this responsibility to ourselves? How do we keep that in mind as we go through our path? Because we will be able to help improve translation in this way, make it more, whatever you want to call it, equitable.
Well, by remembering it all the time. I mean, the fact that you have this concern already, it tells me that this will be something that will always be in the back of your mind when you read a text and when you translate it, right?
I'm not sure how many people have this concern.
But we are not responsible for others. We are only responsible for ourselves, I think. Otherwise, that you are in a big trouble because, I mean, what do you want to do? But what we can do actually is, I mean, apply it in our own practice of translation. And then, you know, when we have translator meetings or conferences, talk about these things, make these, you know, address that, make it a topic of discussion. And it doesn't mean that everybody will agree, but at least everybody will hear it and everybody will talk about it. And then, I mean, some people don't change their minds, but some people do. And some people, I think, to have the discussion is probably if you want to, you know, have to reach out to other translators. That's first being a good example yourself in terms of what you practice, and then talk about it, I think. But at the same time, still I mean, it's great to feel that responsibility, I suppose, but also it could be a bit of a burden if you know, or frustrating, because it won't be fulfilled by others necessarily.
But we have the Buddha's example, right? He was exactly that in many ways. He included everybody into his Sangha. And he also encouraged the recitation of the sutras in their own native languages. It wasn't just Sanskrit, and it wasn't just the Brahmins who became bhikkhus. So we know for sure that this was the intention of the Buddha.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so what's the question? How to make the teachings accessible to diverse cultures that don't necessarily are open to it right now? Is that the?
Now the question is in our own training as we go through the path, you know, of really learning how to translate, how to keep that in mind, just to keep in mind our audiences, you know. That is just not one audience anymore. It's not the same audience of the 19th century or the 20th century. And we hope that in the 21st century, the Buddha Dharma can really extend to places where actually already bodhicitta may actually be in action out of necessity, like, you know, the white helmets in Syria, saving people in the middle of bombings, you know. But that they don't have the Dharma. We're not missionaries, but we are trying to make sure that whatever renderings that we do of translation, that it will be accessible to people. And so I think that is on our effort to try to just have this clear idea. And I don't hear it enough, to be honest, in the translations, institutions and groups. I don't hear it enough. I know that we're not there yet. So in some way, I do bring it up out of a sense of responsibility and out of a sense that we have to begin to talk about it in a way that eventually it would be more.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is very important, and it's not only limited to like gender and race issues. It's also generally a question of culture, I think, because like, for example, and that's something I'm personally interested in, chanting, right? So the emotional, everything that comes with melody, with singing and so on, is all Buddhist traditions that have been established and have developed into Buddhist cultures, you know, from Sri Lanka to Mongolia, and you know, everywhere they have this very, very strongly, and it's not really there yet. So some sanghas, they, you know, recite in Tibetan and sing in Tibetan, which I think is great in terms of inspiration, but I think it's an obstacle in terms of creating an inclusive environment for the receiving culture, right? Because it's so alien, you know. I mean, I think for many of us still, we hear Tibetan, it's wow, it's so mystical and it's holy and inspiring in this sense. But for many people, that's not enough. And I think for one aspect of the one of the many aspects for the Dharma to flourish somewhere is that the artistic world also receives the Dharma and is nurtured by the Dharma and then translates the Dharma as well, which means music, which means poetry, right? Prayers that are ideally, you know, like sacred prayers that have been blessed by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, that are rendered in ways that can be sung and can be recited in beautiful ways that don't mimic, like the Tibetan way, for example. And I'm not dissing the Tibetan way at all. I love it, but it's not the Austrian way. It's not the Colombian way. It's not the American way. It's, you know, it's a Tibetan way, which is great. But you know, if we want communities, our own communities, to adopt this, I think it's part of the translation discussion to also use our own traditions of poetry and do that. So and I'm going to make some self-advertisement here. So this is, as I said, something I'm interested in, and I've been working with a friend on the translation of the Sanctumanlam into an English meter. And so we completed that. Now we're giving it to some friends for review and feedback and so on. So what we did here is this, maybe it's also a good example for translation work. So why I did this in the first place is because, where is it? It's here. But this is a text. I don't know if you can see the title. Okay, so you can read Sanctumanlam Gidelwa Chobdik. So it's a collection of commentaries on the Sanctumanlam, and one of them being by Khinchen Ape Rinpoche. So that's the text I wanted to translate, which I did. And so in the course of that translation, I had to also make my own translation of the prayer itself to accord with that commentary, that particular commentary, right? I think there are many great translations of this. It's not completely different, but there are some details like this. There's this one verse at the end. What is it? What is this verse? Yeah, this Jambel Pawejitar Kiampatang Kunto Zambote and Deshinte, Teta Kungi Jesu Talopchir, Kewadita Tamche Ratu Mo. So this basically says how we should dedicate our merits. And the prayer says that I follow the ways that Manjushri and Samantabhadra practice dedication. And there are different translations of this verse. So there's one I saw which says that just as Manjushri is omniscient, and just as Samantabhadra is as well, or something like this. And Chitar Khenpa does not, in this case, refer to knowing how everything is, which is sometimes the case, but it means specifically the knowledge of how to practice dedication. And this is what Khinchen Ape Rinpoche explains in his commentary. So therefore, I could not follow that original translation, but I had to, translate the meaning as I just explained. So, okay, so that was the initial thing. And then I thought, oh, it would be so wonderful to have a version that can be recited with a melody that can be sung. So therefore in a metered, and have a metered translation. And so I have a friend who's also in Vietnam, an English teacher. Among other things, he's also a ballet dancer and a generally a very artist kind of person, a dance teacher and so on. And we worked on this translation for many months. Sometimes we meet for 3 hours and we only translate 2 stanzas. And I would always come with the commentary, and then we go line by line, and he had suggestions, and then I make changes and so on. So my main job was to make sure that the meaning is complete and not distorted in the translation. And then his main job was to make it beautiful and metered. And so we kind of we worked together like this way, and it worked. I'm quite happy about the product, the resultant translation, really. And so now the next step is to find good melodies, and then to work with musicians to develop a melody that is singable, right? That is not too complicated. It's not for performance, but that people can sing in communities, but that is also inspiring and beautiful and so on. So that's something I'm personally very interested in, and I think it is also something lacking in the Western Dharma world, and I think it's something that can have benefit, because it's a dimension. I think it's an important dimension in the Buddhist practice for communities to have something to. I mean, we do that already to practice together, but to do it in our own language and to sing in our own language and so on. So that's something I wanted to add to that. But yeah, please, Angelica, continue talking about it. I think that's be that voice. That's important. Yes, Facundo.
Thanks. Talk, Christian, and I was thinking that I felt inspiring by what you said, that in the beginning you never thought to become a translator, and that's what you said, right? Okay, so the other day I was listening to also an interview with a translator, and he said the same, and he said maybe it's a little bit related with what Angelica was saying, that he said that he never expected to become a translator, and he said that probably the first translators in Tibet they didn't also, because in Buddhism we don't consider the idea of convert people, so it's more like an spontaneous activity. And that was really inspiring for me in that way, to think like a way of practicing my own practice by translating. The other day we also had a talk with the, I don't remember the French monk. He said you can practice by translating, by being mindful, by connecting with the lineage, with the master that you are translating. So maybe it's a little bit related. I don't know. I just wanted to share these thoughts.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It really, I mean, in terms of what Damien said, like you can practice in terms of by translating, by what did you say?
Yeah, by working.
Yeah,
by using shamatha and vipassana, and then using it by practicing shamatha and vipassana, and then using it to nurture your translation.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you talk to great teachers like Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, he's so skillful. He's incredible. So for example, he would say stuff like, if you're horrible, like if you do horrible things. No, I'm really paraphrasing him, so I'm not. Please don't think that that's what he said, but I'm trying to paraphrase. If you do horrible things and then you have some regret and think it's better to not do that, that's already great. We can rejoice in that. We shouldn't feel too bad if we did something bad, but no, okay, I'm really, I shouldn't say that he said that. That's what I'm interpreting, okay? What I mean, what I want to say is that it really, everything boils down to our motivation, right? So even if we, regardless of how much we actually achieve in terms of translation now, if we have a really, really clean, pure motivation to do, to do something so that other beings can, not only to benefit others, like in a general sense, I want to have a useful life. This is also, that's something actually Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche told me when, about some things that I was doing. He said, it's not enough to think that, oh, I want to do something useful. I want to, do something that, he said, no, that like really take this motivation of bodhicitta serious in what we're doing. So we're doing something so that other beings can become Buddhas, and to really take that serious, not just, okay, I translate because, I want to do something useful with my life. Otherwise, what would I do? And I mean, I have to confess that that's not always present in my mind when I translate. But that's the one reason why you cannot see it. But I have a like a calligraphy in Vietnamese style of calligraphy, but it's the writing, the language is English, and it's the translation of the Changchup Central Rinpoche prayer. So I was in Saigon some months ago, and I went to a temple there, and there were people, you know, like calligraphy artists sitting there in front of the temple and offering, you know, they make calligraphy and you can ask them, you know, for what you write. But of course, they don't write Tibetan. They cannot write Tibetan, right? So I gave them this prayer. I mean, it's a funny story, but I'm not going to tell the whole story. And yeah, so this one was first I asked the guy, but then he made so many mistakes. Wait, I want to tell the story. This is actually really funny. I'm sorry if I'm digressing, but please. Yeah, so he made one of these calligraphies, you know, they are quite these long, beautiful, like a red brocade, like a little bit like a tanka, basically, like a red brocade around, and in the center is the paper where they write on. And he wanted to make a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, the very famous Vietnamese master who passed away recently. And so he started writing, and then he wrote, the first is breathe, and then he wrote you are, and then he wrote online. and I was reading it and I said, breathe, you are online. That's so interesting. Why did? And then I realized that because he didn't speak English, hardly any English. So actually he was reading breathe, you are alive, right? But he didn't understand. So then he thought maybe he's familiar with the word online. So he wrote online, and I was laughing so much. And then I really wanted to have this. I thought it's such a great mistake, but he didn't want to give it to me. And I said, no, please don't change it. And I offered him money, and he said no, because as an artist, he was offended. If I take something home that has a mistake by him, that's not right. So he really didn't want me to have it. So I only have it as a memory, but not as a thing. And then, yeah, anyway, so then a colleague of his, a lady did this verse, this bodhicitta verse. And so I have this opposite of my office desk, so that at least from time to time, when I look outside of the screen, then I see in big letters, she did it really beautifully. I have big writing bodhicitta and then the whole verse. So at least I remember it sometimes when I. So yeah, so it basically all boils down to bodhicitta, and all the great masters, I think, will always emphasize this all the time. And yeah, I think the outcome of the translations that we actually produce is very difficult to predict for many reasons. First, culture changes, language changes. We don't know if what I'm writing now is people are going to like it in 10, 20 years. We really don't know, right? And you know, the beauty of the target language, that's also so important. How it speaks to people, again, Angelica, of different ethnical backgrounds. You know, we all speak like, I mean, in your case, Spanish, right? If you write something for the Spanish audience or for the Colombian audience, I'm sure this is going to be a bit different, right? So same Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, I'm sure it's the same. So yeah, but what we can control at least is to make this motivation, and I really trust our teachers that this motivation has an impact, if not on the translation, in terms that the actual, you know, product that we produce and print or people read, that will last over many years, but at least the thought of bodhicitta itself, that will definitely bear fruit. How, we will see, but it's not wasted. It's never wasted. So at least that is for guaranteed that this will contribute. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about that so much. Okay, Sibele.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Christian. Actually, I have a request and not a question. Would you mind sometime sharing with us your translation of the Nolam Sancho?
Oh, absolutely. I think I want to share it with the whole world.
Thank you.
Not only with you.
I would very much like to because what you said is really something I think a lot about, especially for us who practice the Vajrayana Buddhism, which is a lot of, I mean, if you are more of a solitary meditator who does shamatha and vipassana, maybe the chanting doesn't make such a difference. But for people who practice in groups, the chanting is really, we need to think about it. And we need to think how to also render that in our specific languages and poetry and everything. So, so then I'm very interested in see what other people are doing in that respect, and I would very much appreciate that, having your translation.
Absolutely. I want to share it with as many people as whoever wants to see it. And it's not ready yet. It's still in, we're going to get some reviews and so on. But actually, I think it's not this chanting thing. I heard a talk about the importance or the function of chanting, and it's not only actually for communities, because when you see people like, let's say, farmers who work in the fields by themselves, what do? They often sing, right? And also, what do we do when we feel sad or when we need some comfort? We sing. Oh, I mean, not everyone, obviously, but it's not only, it's like an anchor, it's like an emotional anchor. It can be, right? And so if this emotional anchor is also connected to the teachings of the Buddha, I mean, how wonderful. So it's true, of course, that the community thing, that's binding us together in singing and so on. But I think it's even more than that. It goes deeper than that, I think.
Yes, and there's also the mnemonic aspect of it. It's
exactly
much easier to memorize anything
yes.
that is rhythmic and chantable. Then it goes into your head much easier.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
May I?
Sure, why not?
Okay. You have two things. First, about this chanting. I think this is really good idea that we can chant these prayers and stuff in our own languages. I think, especially here in Latin America, Latin American context is very different, as I said before, from Europe. We have very different mentalities, and singing is very appealing to us, really. And I think this is why evangelists are so popular around here. I once was invited by an evangelist Peruvian community to one of their rituals, or I don't know how to call it, their gatherings, and they were singing, but in a particularly Peruvian way, like Peruvian indigenous tunes, but with this Christian chantings, and it was so nice. And then they asked me to sing something, and I was so shy, and also I didn't have the tunes to sing anything in Spanish, So I think it's great that you're doing this thing, and I think we should go into that also more and more. Then, but my question is relating to this Spanish. When you have Tibetan texts that have a metric, you have a measurement, which is very short, because Tibetan is like chewing gum, like you said before. So you can also make it very tight in a very short format, but Spanish uses very long structures and words. Spanish words are even longer than English words in many cases. So it's very difficult, challenging to squeeze the meaning into such a small format. So what do we do then?
Wait.
In your opinion, in your personal opinion? Yeah.
You want to squeeze? Hello? Yes. You want to squeeze?
No.
Into the Tibetan format?
No, this is precisely my question. What's your personal opinion on this? Should we change? We use another metric
Yes.
options? Because in Spanish we have
Emphatic,
like 9 and
emphatic,
12, you know?
Emphatic, yes.
Okay, good.
I think we have to,
and then
because the languages are, for many reasons we have to. I mean, the nature of Tibetan language is very different from Western languages, right? It's completely different.
Mhm.
So Sanskrit is closer to European languages, much closer. So if we want to be inspired in terms of melodic recitation and so on, I think whether we go that way, but at least, you know, take inspiration by the Sanskrit tradition and see what kind of meters they use, and what kind of melodies they use, but then inform ourselves of the indigenous traditions, like Peruvian, you know, or Chilean indigenous tunes and melodies and songs. Yeah, like study that, and then I'm not saying you, but you're going to be busy enough anyway. But in terms of, you know, the whole translation culture, then some people should devote themselves to that, and or not only, actually some people who are already studying and working with this and who happen to have interest in Buddhism, bring them on board and then work with them, because we cannot do everything, right? That's why you know, it's very hard to find. Ideally, a translator should be an accomplished practitioner, should be, you know, perfect in the source language, in spoken and classical or literary Tibetan, should be accomplished in the target language, should be a poet, must have, you know, encyclopedic knowledge of the Dharma. So how many people have all of these qualities in one? Ideally, yes, but practically speaking, we have to work as teams. I think that works. That works. So for poetry and
now we're going to have to.
It's gonna be good to.
We're going to have to include the musicians now into the translation groups.
Yeah, I'm not even joking. We are actually doing that for Team's Vision project. We have one musician who happens to be a Dharma practitioner, and we're having meetings, and you know, they're working on some rendering, and this guy, he has been working with one of the translators to see how they can, you know, adapt and then do their own thing. So there's first is, you know, the translations, and then there's adaptations. So sometimes you would use just one or two verses from a translation and then repeat that, and, you know, you create your own thing based on this, right? And then you see what happens. And some things are going to be just experiments and they won't last, and that's okay. It's just part of the process. And we're not perfect. We're gonna, everyone, 100. I mean, I don't think there is one translation in the world that is flawless, right? We can forget that. But we try our best, and some things are going to work, and other things are not going to work. And that's part of the big picture of the big process, is improving. I think it's already improving a lot since, you know, the beginning of Tibetan translations. Where we are now, there's still so much to improve, but it's already, you know, it's amazing what's already out there. Actually, it's wonderful. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. Then another question regarding the because the context in which we are in, our cultures, our respective cultures, and how to get to the audience. I mean, in not only culture, language, like in language related issues. For example, Spanish. You mentioned Spanish from Spain and Spanish from Chile in Latin America. We all kind of understand each other very well. We can communicate, but we have our own personalities, our own sound, our own environments, you know. So I think it's nice that we are a bunch of Latin American translators here, because we need this Latin American sound, you know, because it all sounds too Spanish for us, you know. It's like when you watch anime movies and they're all translated in Spain and they sound, we understand, but they sound funny. So I think it's great that we're a bunch of Latin Americans here. But then also, what about the choices of choosing a text to translate? You know, because we also have different mentalities and we have different processes, you know, and we have an audience here that is mostly, of course, yes, we have this inclination to choose the text that we're interested in, that because we have been practicing for some time and we're curious about a certain subject, like Abhidharma or some stuff like that, and we're very much tempted to go in that direction. But then we look at our audience, and maybe we need more introductory stuff, more basic stuff. So what advices would you give? Because not always, but sometimes we have the possibility to choose, you know, because sometimes we get asked to translate something, but sometimes we get to choose the project that we're going to get into. Like, for example, now in Dharma Sangha outreach section. So what advice could you give us on choosing the text to translate?
You mean if they say whatever you want to translate, you have the complete freedom?
Yeah, yeah, for these very lucky occasions.
and that's not just for your own sake, but that's for actually something that should be used and, you know, published and so on, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I would first see what's already out there, right? So because, for example, if it's I don't know, like Lamrim, for example, and there are already 3 different texts on Lamrim, maybe it's not necessary to add another one. But then it depends also on the activities in that place, right? So if there is a lot of, in the example of Lamrim, if there are a lot of Gelugpa teachers and Gelugpa centers there, and they really, you know, that's what they need, there's actually a demand for more translations, then of course it makes sense to, you know, look into the works of Tsongkhapa and see, you know, what is, except for the already existing, let's say 3 Lamrim translations, what other fundamental texts? I mean, I wouldn't, it's so difficult to talk to this, but I wouldn't translate any, you know, esoteric practices now for just randomly, if I choose, right? Because why? These in particular are just, you know, sadhanas and all of this are just used for practitioners, you know, and for that they need the empowerments and the transmissions and all of that. So if that's not there, why would I choose something like this? So, I mean, generally, yeah, Tenrim teachings, Tenrim, like the stages of the teachings, like Lamrim, like Gampopas, what is it? What is it? The Tarpa Rinpoche Gyen? Is it? Drupchen, you are muted somehow or something. We cannot hear you.
Now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying Dapotargen or Tarpa Rinpoche Gyen.
Ah, yeah, that's the one. And Sakyapa is of course, the Shimpa Shijel. That's such an important fundamental teaching. Yeah. Things like that. I think that's because they are, you know, accessible to anyone. They teach the fundamentals. That's so important. I guess in Spanish there must be already a lot of these basic translations, right? Like the words
yeah,
of my
but there's
perfect
still
teacher.
room. Yeah, for example, we don't parting from the four attachment, the Shempa Chitral, we have the Trapa Gyaltsen's song and the root verses and
yeah,
this Chogyam Rinpoche commentary.
You should translate this one.
We
here.
have that, but Sakya Panditas, we don't have it. Morchen Kungasampo also, we don't have it. What's that one?
That's Kinchanapa Rinpoche's commentary. I'm a big fan of Kinchanapa Rinpoche.
Oh, I really want
he's for those of you who have not
get to know him, but I know you, so
seen him, that's him. He's one of the most outstanding human beings I've met, really. Like, it's incredible. And so yeah, so in your case, actually I'm translating this into English and German at the moment. So when you are there, then you can translate this into South American Spanish.
Oh, that would be lovely.
The text by Sakya Pandita, for example, that's such a short text. Like, really, that you should do actually in your training, just as a practice. You know, there's like this short text. It's very useful.
That's actually, yeah. Actually, that's the text I picked for my first year.
Yeah, and then for Sakya that you are actually working on, but based on the English now, the Tupa Gongsal, Sakya Panditas.
Yeah.
I think these fundamental texts, I mean, just ask the main lineage holders. They will tell you, you know, what are the most important fundamental texts that need to be available if somebody wants to study the Dharma according to your tradition, and they will tell you. I think that's, and then on top of that is, of course, the need for individual sanghas for particular prayers, particular practices, but that's very Lama specific. Right, so for that you need the connection, the direct connection with the Lama who will, you know, give these teachings and so on, and I'm sure that anyway.
I was thinking about what Oscar, who is not here now, but he's also in Dharma Sagar, was saying, that the Bodhicitta ritual, or Bodhicitta ritual by Chogyal Papa that Trichiramochi uses has not been translated in Spanish. At least he doesn't have one. And so he wanted to work on that. And he was also saying that the Guru Bumso was not also translated into Spanish. Yeah, and so, well, he, I don't know if everyone read his proposal, but he was saying, I would like to collaborate with other Spanish-speaking people if they're interested in doing that, and if their sanghas are also interested in having translations of that. And so, yeah, maybe.
Who is that?
Oscar, he's the translation guy from Virupa House in Spain.
Ah, yeah, I know. Yeah. But he doesn't know Tibetan, right?
He came into Dharma Sagar. He's actually participating. Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
I met him.
Yeah. And so he was saying that even texts like that are not available in Spanish, like the Bodhicitta vow ritual or text used by Trichiramochi. It's not available yet.
But I'm not sure if the ritual text is that important for the students, because that's what usually the Lama would use to impart the vows, right? But is that, I don't know, I haven't seen the text. So
me neither. Yeah. I don't know so much.
Yeah. I mean, of course, they are all amazing.
Yeah, well, in Casa Virupa, they have they have the Lama, and it would be nice to receive the vows in Spanish for them, I guess. So.
Yeah, then in this case, if there is a Lama who is qualified to give these vows, eventually, of course, and if the Lama is like a Portuguese or I don't know
he's Spanish, yes, yeah. Lama
but I'm
he's Spanish. Yeah.
Chakdu Gompa. We have some people from Chakdu Gompa here, no?
Yes, Sibeli.
Can you raise your hand?
And others.
Yeah, Chakdu Gompa in the house.
Who is it? Yeah. So you have lamas also, qualified lamas, right? Do they do the rituals in Portuguese when they give, for example, refuge vow or bodhicitta vow, or what happens at that time?
Usually it's still bilingual. I mean, they do the Tibetan as a transmission, but the people repeat in Portuguese.
Okay, so, and what do they do in Tibetan then?
No, they use the standard, mainly for refuge, actually. The bodhicitta vows, they were only given, at least that I translated, by Tibetan lamas. So, but the refuge vow, the basic stanzas of the refuge vow, the traditional ones, those are, people repeat them in Portuguese.
Okay, but what is said in Tibetan by the Lama? If not that which is being repeated, the rest of the ritual is said in Tibetan?
Yeah, because see, since it's just a refuge ceremony, it's actually the lamas know they give teachings on what refuge means. It's not a specific. Only the refuge vow specifically is what's said and repeated, and they don't use the Tibetan. At least the ones I translated, they don't use a Tibetan text for the refuge vow.
Okay.
They use the
see.
teachings on. Understand?
And they speak.
So
they give the vows in Portuguese.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
they're translated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Yeah, that's good. That's very, very good, I think.
Okay. So it's great. It seems that it was very interesting to everyone. We're 1 hour later and still all there.
Great.
If we would be together and with cups of tea, I'm sure it would take even longer, much longer.
Yeah,
So
I
enjoy.
wish. It would be nice to have some real meetings, right? Everything is on Zoom now since 2 years. I mean, for this is great, obviously, but it's for other things it's a bit of a pity.
Yeah.
Are you planning to ever do something in person for something?
You know, we had that hope at the beginning, but then yeah, the COVID didn't let them think of doing anything else.
Yeah. Maybe
and then right now that everyone is all over the world, and there's no way we can do some real kind of whole semesters in person.
Yeah, the whole semester is of course difficult. Like for KVP, of course, it's the same, and it's great in the sense that it gives the opportunity for people anywhere to work.
Yes. Yeah.
But we have at least the ambition at some point, or the wish to do have some kind of meeting somewhere. Probably it's going to happen when Jose Kinzer Rinpoche gives some important teaching somewhere. Then maybe many of the team can meet.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Maybe at the end of everything we could make some sort of pilgrimage together somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, or I don't know, meet for some other things, of course. Yeah, I mean, on the scale of the training, it looks like unfeasible anymore. But then for kind of specific things and for, let's say, a few weeks or a little more or less, then it can be feasible. Yes, and this is definitely something that I would like to do as well.
Or like conferences, translation conference or Tibetan conference.
Yes, or I don't know, receiving teachings together or working together on, I don't know, specific translations. Or we didn't write down all the options and what we would like to do, but there are many things that I'm sure everyone has in mind, and we also have some things in mind.
I like what you said about us making an aspiration. In the beginning, you said that of your lecture, and it's true. We made an aspiration to be together somehow. Here we are.
Yeah.
Getting to know one another.
Yeah, it's great. So the journey that you are on now is, as you probably know, most people who study Tibetan don't study for very long. I'm sure you've you heard about this. You know, there's so many people who study and then they give up, and then a few years later they inspired again, and then they study again, and then they give up, and then they study again. So that's the first thing, is to have this. It's gonna be difficult, but it's so worth it. It's so important. So just stick through it. And if you can, of course, sometimes the conditions just don't allow it. But if it's possible, then please give everything you can to this, because I mean, you know it, that's why you do it, but I think it's good to repeat it. really, we need the more translators, the faster we can get, the better, because I mean, the Dharma is always needed, but we have the additional problem that we don't know in terms of the, you know, the masters that we have now, the Tibetan masters, in terms of the actually, you know, the fully accomplished masters and also the fully accomplished scholars. We don't know in 20 years what the landscape will look like, or in 30 years, right? So there is a little bit of a, not a little bit, I think there's a big time pressure. I mean, it's not that time pressure is like 5 months or something. It's still vast, but it's actually there. So it's so important to translate now, I think. So yeah, please don't give up, and please do as much as you can, and it's wonderful. Sorry for that. Okay, shall we stop?
Yes, thank you very much for everything, sharing all of this.
Yeah,
really nice.
I'm glad.
And I'm sure that we'll all benefit from it in many different ways.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Good luck for
Thank
everything.
you, Christian.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.